Dude, I try my best to be as organized as possible and like make it easy for the guests. I've had a few people be like, "Do you need me to bring anything or like prepare anything?" I'm like, "Dude, nope, just come and chill. I'll have everything ready to go." Marcel Sletten, you ready to jump into this?
Yeah.
Cool, man. Thank you for joining me for an episode of On That Note. I'm excited to have you. We met at the MJ Linderman concert,
we did.
Right?
Yeah.
Elijah introduced us. I'm glad we got to meet there, and then really I was like, oh shit, this guy's super cool. When I found out you not only like Water From Your Eyes, who I became obsessed with, but you booked that show and seen it. Yeah. And you told me how it went, but can you tell the listeners here how that went down?
Yeah, so my friend who also books shows around town, he basically hit me up one day because their booking agent had approached him about like doing a Water From Your Eyes show in Athens, and it wasn't really his thing musically, and so he sort of hit me up and was like, hey, this band wants to play in Athens. They're not really my thing, but would you be interested? And I'd never heard of them before.
Oh, wow.
And I checked them out on YouTube, and I just like immediately loved it, especially like When You're Around, that song, because it was just such like, it's very different from what they're doing on this new album. But like,
which one is When You're Around? Oh wait, that's the first song on the last
on
album
Structure,
that came out?
I think it's called. Yeah, the one before this.
Such a strange,
but it's a
one-off song kind of.
Yeah, exactly. It's very different from what they usually do because it's this very like Smile era Beach Boys kind of lush 60s pop thing. And they
so different.
Yeah, and they've just kind of, and there was stuff on that particular album that was definitely like industrial kind of post-punk, very noisy, and they really like went further in that direction with this new album. Mm-hmm. But they were definitely still doing more accessible pop stuff around the time. And I love that juxtaposition immediately, because like I do that in my own music. Yeah. Of like blending like accessible pop stuff and then like really abstract noisy soundscape stuff, and I love that element of it, and I was just like immediately hooked, and I was like, oh yeah, I have to book them. And I got in touch with their booking agent, and they ended up choosing Sword 2 to be on the bill, and then I ended up choosing my friend too, Reed Winkler to be on that to like complete it.
Who featured on Pressure Drop.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Dude, that song is amazing. I've listened to it so many times in the last like 48 hours. Because I like went to do a deep dive on all your stuff the other day. I was like meal prepping, so I just threw on your whole discography, and I mean I'm sure I'm a little partial to that song because of there's vocals, and that's something I can really hang my hat on, and Reed Winkler really like crushed that melody.
I mean, like I made that entire like instrumental like with her in mind basically. And like it was all ready, and then like all she had to do was just record her vocal part, and it just like fit so perfectly over it. It was like so seamless, and I couldn't believe it, because like it was really the first time I'd properly collaborated with somebody before. Definitely the first time ever with like a vocalist, because my tracks have never had like lyrics or vocals like before that. And like I definitely went into that track the like mindset that I wanted to make like an indie folk song, because I was I've always been a fan of stuff like Mount Erie and like Sun Kill Moon, those are like the two artists I was definitely thinking about when I was creating that like backing track. And I
Mount Erie the same. Is that Phil Ephraim?
Yeah, Phil Ephraim from the Microphones. That's right. But yeah, and I had met Reed while she was still a student at the University of Georgia here in Athens, and I just discovered her solo music, and I just became like completely fascinated by it, and I was like immediately like super into it. And so I had wanted to like collaborate with her on something for a long time, and yeah, once like she sent over her like recorded vocal part, I was just like so happy. It was like this feeling that I had like never experienced before when like producing a track. And yeah,
totally different experience. I mean,
yeah,
having vocals
totally.
And because it was what, your third album.
Yeah, it's the
and
third
like
album.
2 EPs.
Yeah,
before you put out a song with vocals, so that must be pretty wild.
Yeah, it was so interesting to hear like my stuff with like a singer on it, and like it was, and to actually do like a song.
Right.
But
it really does fit quite well within everything else you've done. It's not like it's kind of not like, you know, Water From Your Eyes, where that song, that one song sounds like it almost is a different band.
Yeah,
the one we were just talking about. I forgot the name of it already.
When You're Around.
Yeah. But it's like, I mean, that song easily fits in with the rest of your stuff.
Yeah, definitely. I've always been very influenced by folk music, and I think that's why like I incorporate a lot of like synthetic guitar sounds and like pedal steel and all that. I mean, like it's all over. Like going back to my first EPs, it's all over that, and it ends up being a very different thing a lot of the time than like, you know, traditional folk music, but it's always been such a strong influence on like everything I've done. Just the approach and like the kind of delving into like, I don't know, like the emotional aspect of it, I guess, and like the kind of using these kind of synthetic sounds to create something that feels like very human. That's something I've always been like interested by, because like I've always, you know, been really into artists like Aphex Twin, Oneohtrix Point Never, who I feel like really pull that off, who just, you know, what they make is electronic music, but it's just so emotional, and it's like what a great like folk song should do, you know.
Yeah.
It's like, that's like always been like a big appeal for me. It's like that kind of stuff.
Would you say you grew up on more folky music and then discovered ambient music later?
Yeah, definitely. More so like I grew up on like rock and roll and stuff, just like the Beatles and Stones. Right. And like my father in like the late 50s, he was like one half of this like Everly Brothers style rockabilly duo cool. In New Jersey. And like, so there was always that like background and like, but yeah, like I've always definitely like grew up listening to a lot of rock and roll and country, and like that was definitely a big part. And then I guess I started listening to like a lot of those like electronic artists I mentioned, like when I was about like 14 or 15, I guess. And then I didn't start like making my own music until I was 19, so 4 years ago. But yeah, it's always, you know, always been a part of me that like the traditional like folk and rock kind of
singer-songwriter type style.
Yeah,
it's hard. It'd be strange if it was the other way around.
Yeah,
you know, if you started with Aphex Twin when you were like 6, you know, like that's all you're listening to, and then you discover. I wonder if that's ever happened to anybody.
That's kind of what I was like pleasantly surprised when like I got to know Elijah, and then I found out that he was like a Oneohtrix Point Never fan. Like, I thought that was so cool.
Elijah has like very wide ranging taste.
Yeah,
it's awesome.
And I definitely appreciated that, because like I love his stuff, and I think it's great. Like I think it's really great rock music, and then but to know that, you know, someone who can make great rock music but also appreciate stuff like Oneohtrix Point Never, I think that's
he was really at cool. The Water For Your Eyes show as well.
Yeah.
I got into Oneohtrix Point Never maybe back in, I think it was really 2020 when I found out about I don't know why I forgot that. Is it Replica? Is that the name of the album? Yeah, the one with the skull.
The skull.
Sickest album cover. That was like what grabbed me, and then I listened to it. And at first I probably thought it was like a little boring, because I just hadn't really listened to that kind of stuff. Yeah. And then I heard Sleep Dealer. I was like, dude, holy shit. And there's some like concert video of him playing at that. Like
Pitchfork Festival.
Yeah, and there's like
the guy in the red
one
hat.
Dude is losing his mind, and it was like, this shit rocks. Yeah. Like that guy sold it for me. And then it was like, I listened to that.
The red hat guys become so legendary.
Yeah, dude, I'm sure. Like it's so funny because nobody else is like, I mean, everybody's vibing because it's a very.
But he's just like feeling it.
Yeah, I love that.
And it's funny because like that album, I think I remember reading an interview with Dan where he was saying like, with Replica, he was originally wanting to do something very like beat oriented, sort of like minimal techno, like The Field, like working with like samples, and he thought it was like too cheesy or something, so he ended up like making it out of just television like commercials and making more ambient. Yeah, but it's funny because like as abstract as Sleep Dealer is, it does have this odd kind of beat to it. Dude, it's like
it bops. Real, yeah. There's like some samples in it that are like that play 11 times before it changes, like very weird rhythmic elements to it and like time signatures with different instruments.
I just found out some really like mind-blowing thing that, but like I think it's on Power of Persuasion, like the looping piano sample that opens it. The guy who plays that he sampled it from a commercial, but the guy who plays it in the commercial is like the dad or like the granddad of Victoria from Beach House.
Whoa, weird.
And I was just like, that list like blew my mind. I wonder if
he even knew that. I mean, how could you? That'd be crazy.
I don't think so. But somebody, he is like a famous like classical guy, and I forget his name, but something Legrand or however you say their last name. But yeah, I just and it's funny because like with that particular album, people have been discovering more and more samples from it lately, just like out of nowhere, which I think is so cool. But yeah, that's definitely my favorite Oneohtrix Point Never album. It's definitely been a major influence on a lot of stuff I've done.
Yeah, I can definitely hear some of it in your albums, a little bit of Oneohtrix Point Never.
Yeah.
But he's also, I feel like he's kind of become a bit like our generation's Aphex Twin.
Totally.
Like most people I feel like a lot of people who love music but don't even necessarily listen to a whole lot of electronic music still would know who he is simply because of like, I mean, working with The Weeknd helped a lot, like the number one pop star. But even before that, it seemed like he was garnering a lot of attention for in the mainstream, even though he's pretty much simply just an electronic artist.
Totally. I definitely think he's one of the most influential artists right now, like without a doubt. I mean, like just like his influence of like on like contemporary electronic music alone. I mean, it's undeniable. I think like him and Aphex Twin definitely, coming after, the founding fathers of Kraftwerk and all that, they're definitely, I think they deserve their place in like the history of electronic music. And I've always been such a huge fan of his work. I think that definitely like the two like most obvious influences like in my own stuff is like him and Aphex Twin for sure.
We were just talking about how Oneohtrix Point Never going into Replica with an intention, and then maybe it changed a little bit, right? So it got me thinking about when you put out Mammatus Clouds. Is that how you say it? Mammatus?
I think so. I forgot how you even say it.
Mammatus. So however you say that, Clouds. When you put that out, when you were working on it, did you have an intention going into it? And if so, like, how do you feel like the end product turned out in comparison to like the seed or the original idea of what you kind of started with?
I definitely wanted to do something more folk sounding, and I guess that's like why you have tracks on there like Close to You and of course like Pressure Drop. But like I was kind of been viewing it as like a sister album to the last one I did, Irish Words, Baltimore, like because both are kind of like double albums, and they're kind of like sprawling, and they kind of jump wildly from like style to style, and they're both kind of like breakup albums in a way. But yeah, I like some of the material on Mammatus was like left over from like other albums I did, and I just kind of like put finishing touches on them. But bulk of it was like recorded like fairly quickly. I always like kind of record in spurts, and it was Yeah, I think I came pretty like close to what I had in mind originally with that. It was definitely meant to be, because like I've always been like really inspired by kind of sprawling double albums like the White Album and like Elvis Costello's like Get Happy and like Tusk and those kind of.
I don't think I've heard Get Happy.
It's so insane. It's like he like takes his kind of like wordplay and like bizarre kind of melody lines and just like amps it up to 11. It's like it's very like R&B kind of Motown influence, but like
the only album of his, well, I guess two that I really love are, you know, the big one, This Year's Model, and then I love Blood and Chocolate.
Oh yeah,
that album's insane. I only know about it because Tom York said he was listening to it like a shit ton when he was making OK Computer, I think, or the Bends, I can't remember. And I was just like, oh, let me listen to it. And I was like, I didn't know that Elvis Costello did this kind of stuff. You know?
It's very different from what's considered his like golden era, which is pretty much like My Aim Is True through like Imperial Bedroom, which I think is like one of the greatest like streaks in like any like pop musician's like discography.
Yeah, I need to do a deeper dive.
Yeah, but like I've always been just like really fascinated by like that the kind of melding of like different styles, and just because I don't know, in the case of like the White Album Tusk, it's obviously as a result of like having different songwriters,
right?
But with like the last two, it's all just been me.
Yeah.
And that's just like, I guess, a reflection of just my own music taste, because I really just do enjoy everything. But yeah, the Mammatus Clouds was like very much influenced by like Athens and like moving here, because like I'm originally from Northern California,
right?
And I moved out here 2 years ago, and I just ended up getting really inspired like once I moved here, and that like it informed so much of like my last two albums. And
what inspired the move here?
Just like the music scene, and like I knew people who were living here who were artists, and like so that was like a big draw for me. And
wow.
I was living in a very like rural, isolated part of Northern California, this town called Lodi, near Sacramento, out in the Central Valley, and there was just like no music scene to speak of there.
Yeah,
I'm originally from like Santa Cruz, where there was definitely music stuff going on there, because it's another college town. But I was out in Lodi for a few years, and it was I loved how scenic it was, and how like beautiful, like all the kind of, because it's along the California Delta there, it's all like marshlands and stuff, and it's also kind of like wine country, oddly enough. But in terms of just like knowing people there, I mean, I didn't know anyone there, and it was just so barren like culturally.
Yeah.
And I kind of wanted to like head back out east, I guess, anyway. And so like I just knew people in Athens, and I came here for the music and art, basically. And yeah, I guess once I started like meeting more and more people here, that's like I got more inspired, and like different people definitely ended up like informing a lot of like the content and the sounds on the album that I ended up meeting here. And like, I mean, definitely a lot of the like noisier kind of guitar stuff on this most recent album was definitely like inspired by my neighbor Shane Parrish, who's an incredible guitarist who's been playing around a lot with Bill Orcutt.
Okay. I don't think I know.
And just both incredible like avant-garde guitar virtuosos.
Nice.
But just like meeting him and getting like exposing myself to this entirely new scene, and just like being blown away, and just of course like going to house shows and stuff like that, with like there's so many artists just from the South in general who come through here. Like I got to like familiarize myself with a lot of like the Asheville scene, because a lot of them would like play here, and like I just thought that was so cool. And it, like definitely emerging from lockdown and all that, where it was just like I really wasn't part of the music scene for the longest time, like not since like 2017 when I was in New York and I was working for a label there. That was like really the last time I was actually part of a music scene.
Yeah.
And like so it was interesting to go back into like the swing of things. And I'm glad it could happen here, because I think Athens is a very magical kind of place.
Yeah, dude, there really is something magical. It's funny because I moved here for the same reason, but not, 1,500 miles away. I came from Atlanta.
Yeah, sure.
So a little bit easier of a move, but yeah, there is something about Athens that feels very like it's set up to help artists like make the moves they want to make. Everything's so centralized, and I mean, I'm blessed because I ended up moving into a house with Tommy Troutwine, who is recording everybody in Athens. Sure. So I'm constantly meeting people that are coming through here.
Sure. Yeah.
But even just like, that main strip with 40 Watt, Flickr, Paloma Park, Georgia Theater right there, like, not to mention all the house shows you talked about, and then Cine is right across the street. It's like
world famous.
Yeah. I mean, the list goes on. And it just seems like, you can't throw a rock without hitting a musician in this town, which is, that's up my alley. I love that there's so much going on and so many influences to pull from,
Totally.
What's been the most surprising, in a good way, thing about moving to Athens?
I definitely didn't expect there to be so many experimental artists here. Like, is like, I obviously knew about like the whole indie rock history,
right,
and all that, which I was like always been such a huge fan of. But when I moved here, I was expecting to be kind of like one of the only guys in town making ambient.
And to be fair, you're probably the first one I've met, which I was like, oh shit, dude, I gotta get this guy on.
But yeah, like once I like started like meeting people like Shane and Michael Potter and John Fernandez, and like it became like apparent that like, there's definitely this like side to like Athens that's very much like experimental, electronic, avant-garde kind of jazzy weirdness. And like I was pleasantly surprised to find that out. And just like I keep meeting more and more people who are making that stuff here, which I think is really cool. Because like I remember like one of the first times I ever like was like hanging out with people here in Athens, like I was like down near Nucci Space, and like this guy was like saying to me like, oh, he's like, you make electronic music. No, what are you doing in Athens? You got to go to Atlanta. It's like, well, I feel like I came here for a reason. And then like, once I started to meet more people, I was like, this definitely feels like home.
Yeah, dude, and Atlanta's so close too,
Sure.
So it's not like, it's
not like California.
Exactly. Yeah. The same state is like 600 miles wide or tall, I guess.
Sure, yeah.
But dude, that's sick. I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you're, adding to that side of the music scene here. So you just mentioned a few artists, ambient artists here. What are some of the venues here that typically host more avant-garde type shows? Because to be honest, I haven't heard. Maybe I haven't like delved deep enough to try to find them. But where would you typically go to see a good experimental avant-garde show around here?
Definitely Flickr, and I mean like Flickr is kind of like the go-to for everything. Just because they always have great shows. But yeah, Flickr, Buffet, Bolo is like a DIY space that's been hosting some really incredible experimental shows lately.
Bolo.
Yeah,
don't know that.
It's right next to Barbie's studio, actually. If you know where that is, like outside
I don't know where it is, but Chase Park.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's out of that area.
Gotcha.
Bolo, Attica, the local art gallery. They always host experimental stuff. World Famous definitely has hosted some experimental stuff for sure. I guess with them though, that's always been stuff I've been a part of. Okay. So I guess they're more. But that's cool. But I feel like a lot of venues here are willing to like branch out and host that kind of stuff. They're definitely.
It's cool that you did a show at Low Yo-Yo. Right?
I did, yeah.
That's pretty sick that they do that. It's such a small record store. I'm like, that's crazy. You put on shows here.
That was such like a haphazard kind of thing, and like my haphazard kind of thing, because like I organized it very last minute for the guy I played with Fresh Air for, because like he hit me up. He was on tour from Nashville, and like he wanted to play Athens, and I really liked his stuff, and like he kind of just like randomly discovered me and Reed like on Bandcamp, like, which is funny, and like he didn't know that we knew each other. He was just kind of like browsing Athens and Atlanta artists.
Oh, that's so funny.
But yeah, I liked his stuff, and I wanted to like make something happen for him, so I kind of ended up booking something there, because my friend Matt, who helps run the store, I came in one day and I was just like, man, there's this guy, I'm trying to like book him in the next couple of weeks. I'm just like not finding any venues, and he's like, well, we've been wanting to do more like in-store stuff, and so I thought it was a great idea, and so did Fresh Air 4, and so like we ended up doing the show there, and it was just us two on the bill, and my set wasn't particularly great that night, but
well, it's such
I
an
loved the
odd
experience.
Environment to do it in.
I was playing on top of the Neil Young records.
Right.
Somebody's
like, hey buddy, can you?
Yeah.
I'm trying to get after the gold rush here.
Yeah.
That's so funny.
But it was a fun experience, and it was the first and only time I've ever done an in-store performance.
Yeah.
Because I'm definitely used to more like kind of DIY, kind of bolo type spaces, I guess. Gotcha. But yeah, it was fun. I like the fact that like a record store will host kind of stuff beyond the usual like indie rock stuff coming through. But I guess you have stores in other like parts of the country, like Static Age and Nashville, kind of hosting a lot of all kinds of different stuff. I even just like I came across this bike shop in Kingston, New York, which is upstate, and they've been like hosting shows in the bike shop, which I think is so cool.
That's sick.
But yeah, I definitely appreciate the alternative venues, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's spaces. It certainly brings something new to the table, if you're the artist playing, or even if you're, somebody watching, it's like something you don't forget when you're in an environment that feels like it's not meant to have a performance, and then you're watching a performance there. Just like
for sure
imprints a different, like, I don't know, just imprints something different on you, I think.
Yeah.
But how is your live performance set up? Because, obviously I'm so used to seeing, 4-piece indie rock bands.
Sure.
So I know you're up there, you got your computer. What are you typically running, and what's your usual go-to?
I always use Ableton for the live performance stuff. And that's what I record with too. But basically, all my live performances so far have just been laptop only, and that's like approximately like half of my entire setup at home, because like I have my MIDI keyboard, and that's really the only missing piece. But yeah, I just do live software manipulation stuff within Ableton, and it's kind of it's always very improvisational, always very jammy in nature, and I'm always kind of working with like an array of different samples of my own sounds, and mixed with like a few backing tracks here and there, and kind of like riffing over that, and kind of triggering the samples at random, and kind of it's always very leaving a lot of stuff up to chance, and it's because of that every performance is very different.
That's cool.
And I can never tell like which direction a particular version of a track is going to go, and I very much like that. A lot
How
of
do you
it
practice for something like that?
It's just kind of getting a feel. I always definitely plan out the set list.
Okay.
So that part of it is definitely planned out, and I really want to be particular about what each set is going to consist of. And like, for example, like I just played the Lamar Dodd School of Art at the university.
Oh, okay.
They were doing this like 36-hour drone event where like they would artists would like kind of arrive at different times and just kind of play throughout the night, or just like
and
whatever.
36 hours nonstop. Of
Like different rotating artists,
right.
and like I guess like each. With me, it was like one of the only like sets that was actually kind of scheduled. But with other people, they kind of, if somebody was jamming on like guitar, like somebody would like join in on clarinet, for example, or drums.
Whoa.
They would just kind of like it would kind of just like fade in and out and kind of rotate.
Almost feels like a living being constantly changing.
This organism.
You know?
Yeah. But with that, for example, like, because they basically told me, like, you can play as long as you want. That's kind of the entire point. It's just like there's no limit. Just like do whatever. And so I kind of was gonna do. What I ended up doing was this like 45-minute version of this track from Irish Words called I Miss You. And like basically I had a very vague concept of like what I was going to do with like my samples for that track. And but in terms of like stretching out like this one piece,
right,
and all that, I was going to intentionally like leave that up to chance. And so like I ended up jamming it out for 45 minutes, kind of Grateful Dead style.
That's awesome.
And there was like, so there's a lot of stuff like that where I kind of will have like the basic foundation like figured out, but I kind of always want to like always be some kind of like have there be some kind of like improvisational element to the performance. And it's kind of, again, like going back to the thing of making like the synthetic and the kind of like digitized kind of songwriting approach feel more human, and kind of like feel more organic, you know. And it's definitely this deconstruction, I think, of my studio process, I guess, if you could call it. Yeah. But like it's basically just the live sound manipulation I do in Ableton. And it's funny because like I use a Lenovo like IdeaPad, like I don't use a MacBook, and it's just such like such a slow like dinosaur of a computer. So like, which is a big part of like why I can't like play with my MIDI keyboard, because if I have like too many things going on, it's just and so like
that's awesome.
It's funny because like even though like technically like with all these variations I can do live, it is like limitless in that sense.
Yeah.
If I'm like going too crazy with like the plugins and like being like, oh, let's add this, let's add that, it can like reach a point where it just like crashes. So there is some limitation there in a sense.
Have you crashed in the middle of a show before?
No. No, I've had like kind of like moments. Yeah. I've had moments where it would kind of like the audio would like go in and out for just a split second, but then it's fine. But it's never like completely crashed.
A little bit of like a warning shot.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
All right, I'll chill out for a second.
And I definitely, it's funny, I've done it so many times now where I know where that threshold lies. Like
you ride the line.
Yeah. And always bring an element of danger to my performance.
Always.
But yeah, that's essentially how I go about it.
Was there an artist that performed in a similar way that made you realize, oh, you can do that?
Yeah, definitely. When I was a teenager and still living in Santa Cruz, California, my hometown, my friend Madeline Murky, who's a computer musician, she currently lives in Palo Alto in the Bay Area, and the first time I saw her was actually in Santa Cruz. She came down to do a show, and a lot of the time she just does laptop only sets because she works in Max MSP, and she does a lot of live sound manipulation stuff, a lot of live coding, and like that was like definitely such a big like moment for me, like when I finally got to see her live, because I was always like a fan of her music, just listening on Bandcamp and stuff like that. But when I finally got to see her live, it was definitely a moment where I was just like, wow, it definitely like had an impact on me, like seeing her live. And also that night she performed with this guy Jack Callahan, who I later ended up becoming friends with. But he's currently based in New York, but he had like a similar kind of he's also a computer musician, and that night he had just released a tape called Housed, which was basically a collage of all the opening chords to like 80s and 90s like house songs, and like kind of exploring how they have this very distinctive kind of tone to them. And he basically made a tape out of like splicing all these like opening chords to like house songs, and exploring how like it's always such a different vibe from like the rest of the track, because there's always like the beat comes in or the R&B singer comes in, and it's like and essentially his performance that night was recreating that house piece. And that was definitely seeing Madeline and Jack play. And also the second time I saw Madeline was in Oakland, and she played with Jack, and Jack did a set with Jeff Witcher, who's his like regular collaborator. And their set that night was laptop only. And yeah, I think seeing them back to back that particular night was also like definitely left a big impact on me. So I think those three artists for sure had definitely inspired me to like make computer music, and just kind of make that my approach to like songwriting, but also like live performance. And they've definitely had an influence on me over the years for sure.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
It's such a unique approach to live music that I'm certainly not used to seeing, but it's always interesting to see how people do it. Like I love Injury Reserve, and I saw them play in Atlanta, and I was very curious how it would go. And he didn't, it wasn't I'm sure he had a laptop up there, I don't remember, but it was really just Richie T rapping, and then Parker Corey essentially just manipulating the songs that they've already made in real time. And it was really interesting to hear it. As a band, you typically try to be as close to the song as possible, or intentionally different, or like just like a live version of it. But it was interesting to see him manipulating these sounds, like very little details that you might not even recognize, or maybe like accented, or it was just interesting to see, different types of musicians playing different live. I'm so used to seeing bands more often than not.
Sure. When I saw like When Water From Your Eyes play, like essentially like Nate is always like, he has the backing track running on like the laptop, and I think he uses like Reaper or something like that. But basically, he has like the backing track running, and then him and Al will like do the guitar riffing like over that. And I always thought, and they don't travel with like amps or anything. They just plug straight. They all plug straight into the DI, which I thought was so crazy.
Wow,
and,
I guess that makes driving a breeze.
Yeah,
no big van or tour bus or anything.
But yeah, I always thought like stuff like that was really interesting, especially when kind of like rock bands, or at least like electronic adjacent rock bands, adopt that kind of stuff. Like I'm pretty sure like Battles like performed a lot with a laptop too.
Gotcha.
But yeah, it's always something I found very interesting.
What are some of maybe the bigger lessons you've learned over the years since you started making and releasing music? I mean, you've put out 3 albums and 2 EPs. That's a lot of music to put out. I'm sure you've learned a lot about your own creative process.
Yeah. I guess I really didn't know how to record at first. And it's funny because like, I mean, I record everything's internal. It's all software stuff.
Right.
Like I'm not miking
That's
stuff.
true.
It's all VST instruments and stuff. But like, I was still like definitely like on my first album, Vicious Kisses, for example, like there's a lot of like, stuff that is just like so ridiculous to me now, but in the moment made like sense, because I guess I was so like inspired at that time. But like there are tracks where I'll kind of have like a piano like groove going or something, and then like instead of recording like individual like stems in Ableton like I do now, I would just I'd have the loop playing in some like audio player, and then I'd keep hitting like record in Audacity, and so like I would be like recording. There are no like stems for a lot of those tracks because of that. Basically, I was just like recording parts like live and just like recording it. It was all like very improvised. It was all like one take.
Once you print a track, like it's there.
Yeah, exactly. With that particular, and like a lot of those.
The whole album's like that.
Not the whole album, but most of it.
Okay, interesting.
But with like Sleepless Nights in particular is a good example, because that was like
awesome.
That has like there are no stems for that. That's literally the entire track, and it was all the parts for that, like the synth part, the piano part, a lot of that was recorded the first take, and just like I added the parts as I went along, so it was all made in a single night. And like, but because of that, there's like this, when I have all the tracks going in like multiple audio players, and it's just like you keep adding new sounds to it, it adds this like heavy compression to it. Yeah. And like, so there's like a lot of artifacts like that on those kind of tracks because of that. And it's so funny. And then like,
so you're probably not remixing that track later.
No, and if I do, I'd have to re-record.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's funny, like just stuff like that, and just like, yeah, I guess eventually, like the other thing is just like, I don't know, I guess like just your influences change over time, and I feel like now I'm living in a different part of the country. Like I'd never lived in the South before this. I'd never even been to the South before this. And like,
so funny.
And just like being in a completely new environment, especially after my music was so heavily like Northern California inspired for like so long. And just like, now I'm in this like different environment, and just like, yeah, just the influence is shifting. But as for like what I learned beyond like just like recording techniques, or basic recording techniques,
right.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Something you might like go back and tell yourself, like in the, your previous or your past self.
I guess like it would be like to just not overthink it too much. Don't overthink the process, and like it's okay to kind of like map stuff out and kind of have a clear idea of what you want to do, but worrying too much about like how this will sound or that will sound, rather than kind of like exploring kind of new sounds and just kind of letting stuff ride out and jam, is kind of, I just feel like more important in terms of like discovering like where your true like aesthetics lie, I guess.
Yeah, you do have to explore and be open to exploring that to be able to find out what you really like. I mean, there's so many times where I pick up the guitar with the intention of trying to write the newest song that I like am in love with, and it would just be nicer if I could just take a breath and like explore how I feel about maybe playing this chord 12 times in a row without changing. You know what I mean? Just like putting less pressure on the outcome, and not pressure, but more emphasis on getting creative with it and challenging yourself to do something that you don't normally do.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I guess the main takeaway for me has just been like, getting better at recording, getting better at just kind of learning basic production stuff. But also just like, kind of just letting stuff come to you naturally, and just like, because there were times definitely when I first started recording music, definitely as a result of like my like newfound like creative inspiration, but just like I would record so manically, and just like it would just be, like the first album was recorded within a single week, and just wow. Just like, now I kind of let things like definitely simmer a bit more, and it's definitely a slower process.
What about the first EP? I listened to it last night. I was like, dude, this fucking slaps. I wrote some random notes. You might be horrified, but I love the first EP, Mount Diablo Sunset has crazy layers. I listened to that before you came over here too. I was like, it's still awesome. And then Grace has these cute little secret rhythms, and then the most intense, disturbing sound I've ever heard. Jump out, and I was like, oh! It was like a jump scare, dude. I loved it though.
I think what inspired that like transition, there's some like Beck song, I think it's on Odelay, where he does that. He just like adds like this like just noisy bit out of nowhere, and then it jumps back into like the rhythm. And I think that was definitely, I got that part from like Beck or something like that. But
I love when people do stuff like that. It just shows like, I don't know, it keeps the listener on their toes, and it kind of, there's like a self-awareness. it's almost meta
Yeah.
to do something like that.
That was the first track I ever made, was Grace.
Whoa.
I was like,
Wild.
I was 19. I had just come back from this weekend trip to San Francisco, and I was like so inspired by that whole trip, and just like I was going to all these like cathedrals and just like hanging around like North Beach and all that, and yeah, I was just so inspired that I wanted to start making music, and so that was kind of like
it's a crazy first song to record.
And I made it with this. I didn't even like make it with any traditional software. I made it with this synth website where you can like play all these like different synths with like your computer keyboard. And that's how I made it, was just like recording myself jamming with this synth website, and then like taking the different loops and like arranging it all in Audacity, and that's how that was made.
Whoa. Wild.
And yeah, a lot of that. I mean, that was very. I mean, I remember I was staying at my friend's house in Richmond in San Francisco, and they had like a Hammond organ in their bedroom, and like I was playing that main melody like on the Hammond organ. I had come up with it there, and then like I just like made sure like I memorized it, so like once I came back, like the day I came back home, I started playing it on the keyboard, and that's when I recorded it, and I made that track like in about a day, which is how a lot of like those EPs went.
Yeah,
it was just all recorded so quickly, and like
so sick.
Yeah.
Dude, I also wanted to ask about Primordial Void, your label, which you established in 2018. When I first met you, you had told me that you had your own label, and I was like, whoa, holy shit, that's so sick. So, you know, what made you come up with the idea to start your own label? I feel like in my years, I've heard many people be like, you know what we should do? We should start a label.
Yeah.
And nobody fucking does it.
Yeah.
You know, and like you actually did it, and you've kept it going for 5 years now.
Yeah.
How has it changed over the years, if at all, since, you know, your first idea, and you know, how does it, what are like the ins and outs that go with running a label that maybe not everybody would know?
Yeah, it's definitely, it's been so different lately, like how it is opposed to how it started out, because I started when I was 18. I had the idea to start a label when I was 17, still living in Santa Cruz, and then at that time I got an offer to work at this record label in New York called Old English Spelling Bee, which isn't around anymore, but they wanted me to come out for a few months and just intern. And so like I ended up just like cutting community college short, and I went out to New York and did that. And I had the idea to start the label before that, but definitely working for that imprint in New York was like it just made me want to do it even more, basically. And so I learned a lot of the ins and outs of running a record label through working for them.
Right.
And and I was running like a music blog when I was a teenager, like up until like I was 17, and I just wanted to do something that was more creatively fulfilling. And so that's kind of essentially how I got the idea to start a record label.
Gotcha.
Because like I wanted to continue like to work with a lot of these artists who I was like covering on the blog, and who I was like commissioning to do like guest mixes for the blog. And I wanted to do stuff like with them, with the label. The core artists like I kind of started the label with were Gabi, Lockbox, and Mammatus. And that's essentially who I kind of first approached. And the first release, which was almost 5 years ago, exactly. The 5-year anniversary is like coming up real soon.
Oh, cool.
So like August 3rd, 2018 was our first release, and it was like this 20-track compilation of like all these different artists who I loved from around the world, and that was like the start of it. And we did some like, I did another release in 2018, which was an EP by Lockbox, and then we did a couple albums here and there in 2019, but it wasn't until like the pandemic hit, when we like really started to like get busy with our release schedule, and just like was doing a crazy amount of releases. I think 2021 was like the most releases like we've done in a single year. I forget how many, but it was just like basically we were doing like an album a month, and it was essentially like what we were doing up until like very recently. It was just like keeping that up, and just like but yeah, I've learned a lot just from running it. I'm definitely looking to like slow things down and just like work more kind of give more attention to like each individual project, each individual release, rather than kind of keep it going. It's this like factory machine line kind of thing.
Yeah.
Just because I don't think it does anybody any good, but like in terms of like adequate promotion and all that. But yeah, I've learned so much, and I mean, I've met so many incredible people just through running it. I've gotten to know so many incredible artists, and like once I moved to Athens and once like shows started happening again, like I wanted to do live events again, because like I had organized like a Primordial Void show in New York in like 2019, and that was like pretty much like the only one of those I did. But like once I came here and kind of familiarized myself with the local scene, I was like, oh, it can be like a production company kind of event promoter too. Yeah. And so like that's when I started getting into, like, this year is when I really started getting serious about like booking shows under the label name.
Okay.
And but yeah. And
Are you specifically booking people that have released on your label, or is
no?
Okay.
Yeah, I'm pretty much like open to anything I like, basically.
Okay.
But I always like there to be at least some representation of somebody from my scene, I guess.
Right.
And like
so
that's
Primordial Void booked Water From Your Eyes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's like, I mean, and I guess the representation for that show was Reed, and like, because she's been such like an important part of like,
that makes sense.
Everything with the label lately, and like yeah, and I think that's been cool to explore that side of like running a label, kind of organizing these live events, because it was really not something we did for the longest time, mainly because of the pandemic. But like yeah, that's been like always like really cool, like doing those shows. But yeah, just like it's been wild. I've definitely learned so much, and I definitely think it's been like a pivotal part of like my own like music making process.
Yeah.
Is because I feel like I like having both things to kind of occupy my time with.
Right.
And, yeah, I'm very grateful for like all the artists I've like worked with, and they've all been like super nice and generous, and it's definitely, I've learned a lot from them. You know, they've taught me a lot in terms of like making music and like booking your own shows and stuff. And it's just like, I've definitely seen it more as like a community or like a collective, more so than like a label, I guess.
Right.
But it's like, I like the idea of like releasing a bunch of stuff I like along with my own music, just kind of like under this kind of like umbrella.
Gives it some context in a
Sure,
way.
yeah. And I like, you know, I've always liked cataloging things. I've always like I being an archivist, and that's kind of another thing I've like, cool. I've seen it as, because like, you know, as somebody who's like always been into like all the like live recording kind of archivists on like Internet Archive, that was definitely like another big like influence behind starting the label, is kind of like just stuff like that. And more so than any kind of one label inspiring Primordial Void, it was just kind of the idea of like capturing like these moments in different like music scenes, and kind of capturing like a time in music, and kind of making it all available for people to listen, you know. Right. Yeah.
Dude, it's funny. In a way, it's kind of what this podcast has also become.
Totally.
Is like, over the years, I mean, I started this almost 3 years ago, and it was in LA, and everything was on Zoom, and every interview was Zoom around people around all over the world up until a few months back, then doing this more in person with people in Athens. So it's like interesting how something you start can be, it can be really finite and like, you know exactly what you want, or it could be very general, and throughout the process of, you know, continuing what you're doing, it can change so much.
Sure.
And it's like, now this could be the Athens, Georgia chapter of the podcast, where I'm only interviewing artists from Athens or Atlanta or what have you. Whereas a couple of years ago, it could have been anything from anywhere all over the world. And it's like, you know, with this label, it's like this is the Athens, Georgia part, the chapter.
Yeah, totally.
You know, it's like, it is interesting to have that, and it almost is. It helps me at least understand a lot more about my own creative process and my own logistical process of releasing stuff. You know, how has having a label impacted the way you are creative with your own music, but more specifically like logistics with how you maybe release music or even consume music?
Yeah, definitely, like, just because like I've always been the only person. I've been like, I do everything with the label. I do like the PR and like reaching out to like radio stations and journalists and all that, and just like that definitely informed a lot of like what I do with like promoting my own music, just kind of learning the ins and outs of all that, and like and also just like reaching out to distributors and kind of getting distribution down. And it's funny because like when I started the label, I wasn't making my own music, but like just getting to know like Gabi, Lockbox, and Mammatus, and just like seeing what they were doing, that like got me so inspired, and just like, and I think a lot of things fell into place in 2019, where it was just like I felt comfortable making my own stuff, and just like, especially because of like what was like going on in my own life at that time, of just like going around Northern California and just like exploring different, like exploring the Bay Area, exploring like the Sierra Nevada, and just it all made me very inspired. And like the label definitely like helped with that, and like especially because like I am always like helping with like art direction or like sequencing albums and kind of like track selection, that kind of stuff. When I'm like assisting with like the kind of the production side of like certain releases, it definitely gives me an insight to my own like kind of music making process, because I'm listening to these songs over and over, and I like now I know them as well as I know my own music, basically. But yeah, it's like it's been really fun, and I think like kind of unleashing that kind of the inner archivist in me is like, and the inner like kind of producer is like, it just goes hand in hand. I think the label will always be like around in some capacity. Right. You know, it may not be as active as it has been like the past like few years, but just like it'll always be around in some form, whether as like a show promoter or like a record label or whatever. But yeah, and I definitely just getting to be able to like work with artists I've worked with, it's just been such a dream.
Yeah, that's amazing.
I was gonna say, like, because I also run like a mix series. It's kind of like it's nowhere near as like active as the label has been, but it's the same thing with that in terms of like documenting stuff and kind of like inviting all these artists from around the world to kind of contribute to it, because I like the idea of a guest mix as opposed to an interview some of the time, because I think it can say so much about the artist's own influences and where they got their sound from, and like stuff like that I've always been like super inspired by, and definitely like mixes in general have always like inspired like my own music. And like when I had Mike from Love Tractor do a mix for like the series, he like he had all these like Johnny Cash songs in there and all these like country tunes, and like I never realized before like I listened to the mix he made, but like he is obviously, in his guitar playing in Love Tractor, he is obviously so inspired by like Johnny Cash and all that like rockabilly stuff, and that's something I never would have like put together had he not like curated that mix, you know what I mean? And it's just like stuff like that is always like,
that's wild. That's cool. You got him to do that too.
Yeah, I was like, I mean, I love them like going back to like long before I knew I'd even be living in Athens. Like they've always been like one of my favorite bands, and just like I was super stoked that he made something, because like that was right after I saw him play with Magnapop and Flash to Bang Time at the 40 Watt.
Okay.
It's one of the first like proper Athens shows I saw like early last year. But yeah, just like stuff like that is just like, I feel like the art of the mixtape has been such a big thing for me, both in terms of just like making my own music, but also like running the label, because it is definitely, the mix series is definitely in the same realm as the label in terms of how it all curated.
Gotcha.
And everything. Yeah.
That's pretty cool that you got him to do that. I didn't even know who Love Tractor was until a few months back. My uncle, who grew up in Valdosta, my mom's side of the family from Valdosta, he had a whole, you can actually see it over there, it's like a whole box of records. It's behind that little cabinet thing. But in it was a couple Love Tractor and Husker Du records.
Oh yeah.
No idea who they were, and then found out Love Tractor was like a huge Athens band from like the 80s and 90s. I was like, oh, whoa, this is cool. And I put it on, and it was so not what I expected either.
Yeah.
It was like very hard rock.
Yeah.
At least the album I have, and I still need to.
Is that Themes from Venus?
I think so. It's like
with
pink,
like the sculpture,
it's like a pink album cover, and it's like a square in the middle. It's very minimal.
Oh, that's okay. So that's before. That's like, I think that's like the self-titled or something.
Maybe
that's like one of their first ones.
Oh,
but
okay.
I know which one you're talking about.
Yeah, it's like very minimal, but super cool because it came out in the 80s, and I was like, this is not what I expected to be.
I think that has the Kraftwerk cover on it that I really love. Of neon lights.
That's cool.
It's like, and
interesting.
Anytime I listen to that, it's just like, it makes me think of like Athens nightlife. Like it's the perfect kind of like picture of like Athens nightlife. It's just so beautiful. But yeah, it's so funny because like Themes from Venus is like when they actually started like singing.
Oh yeah.
And like
because I didn't expect it to be instrumental. The album.
Yeah, and like I think that album Themes from Venus has like some of the greatest like rock songs ever. And I mean, just like they're so melodically just brilliant, and I think they're still just like one of the most like criminally underrated bands ever. Like, I mean, it definitely, if you talk to some real heads and like people who are like go deep in like indie music history, they'll know who Love Tractor is, but like vast majority of people still don't know who
David
they are.
Barbie was singing their praises when he was on the podcast.
Nice.
But yeah, cool, dude. Let's take it to the last 5. I'm just gonna ask you 5 quick questions.
Okay.
And we'll be done. And I always keep saying I'm going to ask you, but I'm not going to ask you. The universe is going to ask you. It will pick out whatever 5 questions it chooses to pick for you. So I'll let you go ahead, swirl that bowl around.
Adds an element of surprise.
Exactly. It takes pressure off me too to think about what question I'm going to ask.
That's perfect. Underrated artist at the moment.
There you go. Love Tractor, number 1.
Yeah.
Lock it in. Anyone else?
Who else? Yeah, no, definitely. Man, I've been listening. It's always so tough because, there's like a million people you want to name, and like your brain just can't like.
As soon as you put on the spot.
Yeah. Of course, yeah. Man, I want to say Squirrel Bait just because I've been listening to so much Slint lately. But it's the band. It's the band that like the guys from Slint had before Slint when they were like 15. Whoa. And they were like, it's funny, they were like 14 or 15, and it was in Louisville, and like Danzig like asked them to like go on tour with them when they were like 14.
Whoa.
And they're just great. They have this their big song's called Sun God. And they ended up like influencing like the Foo Fighters and all these like bands after them basically. Whoa. And they're just incredible. I want to say them, but I feel like they get name checked like enough in terms of like 80s like post-hardcore, but like
I'm gonna look them up so I don't forget. Squirrel Bait.
Yeah,
it's a funny name.
That's
crazy. It's the guys from Slint.
Yeah, it's Britt and Brian from Slint, and like basically it was like the impetus for like Slint and like their later projects, but
yeah. Anybody else?
I really like. Would it be cheating if I like pulled up my music library?
No,
like,
dude,
I feel
no,
like
of course.
That's the only way I can like remember.
I've always. There's another question in there. Actually, I don't know if it is in there, but I'd always ask, what are you like currently listening to?
This is so bad though, because like it's obvious that like my memory has been just shot by like using my phone, and it's just like.
Well, and also, I mean, you have thousands and thousands of artists like in your head at any given moment that you could pull from, and then it's just impossible to like narrow it down. Spotify or Apple Music or whatever you use always helps like bring those back into the forefront.
Yeah. I should say, like, the most obvious one to me that I should mention is he's based in Athens, is Surface to Air Missive, who's actually like one of the
I've heard of that
artists that like kind of really got me hooked on like the contemporary scene in Athens. And even by Athens standards, I feel like he's just one of the most like criminally like underrated artists out there. And
interesting.
He plays everything himself, like on the record. He's kind of like it's like kind of like a Tame Impala thing, just like one man band. And then I think some of it is due to the fact that he has not played live since the pandemic. But
sorry, I didn't mean to start.
That's an incredible song.
That already sounds really sick.
But he is like, he's a genius. He's like, you know, you'll come across new bands in indie music where you'll just like, oh, that's really great. But I mean, with him, I feel like he's like a once in a generation kind of artist. Like he's just his body of work so far is just like unreal. He had like a project before Surface to Air Missive called Dream Love back when he was still living in Florida, but he moved out here. I don't know when, but he's been out here for several years now. But he's great. I feel like him, and because he goes back with like Jake Tobin and all those kind of artists, very kind of like mathy kind of pop, very kind of like prog pop in a way, a lot of bizarre chord changes, kind of like a lot of bizarre stuff going on. But
that's cool.
With him, it's just like he has that element of abstraction, but like he is also just like, some of his stuff is just like straight up beautiful pop music, and it's very like, it can be very Beatles-esque at points, and very just like the harmonies he comes up with are just like, I know I could like talk about him for just like forever, because like he's one of my absolute favorites. But
Surface to Air Missive,
definitely.
I'm gonna definitely check them out later.
Definitely him. A lot of the bands on like we're talking like 80s England now, but like a lot of the artists on like Sarah Records, I don't know if you know that imprint.
No,
a lot of like twee pop and like jangle pop kind of stuff. I don't know if they were ever on that label, but like there's this really cute like 80s twee pop band called Trixie's Big Red Motorbike, and it's just like the most name. And it's just the most like, I don't know, just way too innocent kind of pop music, but it just works, and it just like, but I don't know, that's a tough one. I guess Surface to Air Missive is my main one.
You got a few good ones in there, especially that one, because I'd never heard of him and didn't even know from Athens or anything. I guess I'd heard that name though, but I would have never guessed that he was from Athens.
I wish he'd play out more, because he's just like, I feel like if he did like put himself out there more, he would just like really just like explode in popularity. But it's, as of right now, it's like he does have like a bit of a cult following like online, but it's very much like kind of the world's like best kept secret kind of thing, where it's like those who know or like they're just like crazy about it.
That's awesome. Well, let's check number 2 here. What do we got for question number 2?
Dream 3 band bill. Oh man.
Yeah. Who you putting on this 3 band bill?
Should it make sense stylistically, or like should it just be like my 3 favorite bands? Or
like, you could do one of, let's do a little bit of both. Give me one of like your favorite top 3 that you'd love to see.
This is gonna be like really stylistically over, pretty much like in keeping true to Primordial Void spirit. But my 3 favorite bands of all time, if I had to pick them, are Teenage Fan Club, Steely Dan, and Big Black.
Sick. Big Black is Steve Albini, right?
Yeah.
I need to listen to them.
I totally just like broke this. I'm sorry. I totally
dude, that's so funny. Dude, that's the second time in a row. Last night I had Clear Mountain Entertainment, and Garrett just straight up ripped two of them. I was like, dude, what are you doing?
Impulse.
And no one's done it until last night and right now. Now I got to write another one.
You could tape it together, get some scotch.
That's true. Maybe that'll send a message like, hey, don't rip these, dude.
Have it on here. Do not rip these.
That's so funny.
But as for like stylistically, like that would make sense, because that would just be, I don't know who would go to that show.
That'd be sick. I don't really know. Because that's
like literally like the 3 most like polar, just like.
Yeah. Teenage Fan Club, I feel like if I really tried, I would like them a lot. And I haven't put the time into them.
I love them so much. They're definitely my favorite. Like every song I listen to them is like, oh, that's a masterpiece. That's a masterpiece. Like it's just like they've written the perfect pop song a million times over. Wow. And it's just like they're incredible.
They certainly have a cult following, but they're not huge like on the map. But you'll still see somebody wearing a T-shirt every once in a while.
For sure. And they definitely were like commercially successful in the 90s. I mean, they were label mates with Oasis and My Bloody Valentine.
Yeah.
And I mean, they were, emerged from the whole C86 scene and all that. But they're still, it's only like 2 of the original members left, but they're still like touring and around. I mean, like they just played with my band, the Rishis, in Norway at this festival. But yeah, I mean, they're still around making music, and they may have like ascended like cult status, but I mean, there's still, not as like, you don't hear about them as much as you would My Bloody Valentine or Oasis, certainly. I mean, like, but yeah, they're great. I would definitely say underrated. For as much as they're rated, they're still like underrated. But yeah, stylistically, man, I feel like I'd want like maybe like, well, I should definitely do like raw power era Iggy and the Stooges. I think that would be like insane. And then like maybe like Piper at the Gates of Dawn era Pink Floyd, just like doing like just like, and then shit. Like, man, maybe this is totally going off topic, but I've been getting like really into like live footage of the Wrens. I don't know if you know that band.
I know the name.
They're another underrated one that I mentioned. The Wrens, but like they're just like
WREN.
Yes, yeah. And like if you look at like live footage on YouTube, there's like no other band like them. They're just insane live, just like so intense. And like maybe they wouldn't work on this lineup, but another track. But yeah, and I feel like I really want to like throw in some like, I don't know, 60s like free jazz artists, because I feel like that would just complete like the chaos of this bill I'm imagining. Like throw in like some like Manfred Schoof or like Peter Brotzman or like Don Cherry or Albert Ayler, like one of those. Like I feel like Don Cherry, Pink Floyd, and Iggy and the Stooges, that would just be so.
I don't know who Don Cherry is, but it already sounds insane.
Yeah, he would open. Don Cherry would open the show.
Okay.
Pink Floyd would go on second, and Iggy and the Stooges would just like burn the entire, just like burn the house down. Yeah.
Nice. All right, well, let's check question number 3.
Okay, I won't rip this up.
Thank you. I only have so much paper.
Yeah. Unexpected musical influence.
Drake.
Yeah.
Hunter Pinkston said that. That was so funny.
Really?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't think it would be probably like some indie rock thing, because like, I wouldn't want to say some like hip hop artists, because I think that hip hop has always definitely been like an influence for me from the beginning in terms of like how I approach like chopping up samples and kind of arranging instrumentals. But definitely like some indie rock thing. Yeah, probably. I don't know, just something like the Wrens or something. Just like, because they're like just an emo power pop band from the 90s, and just like, I guess the emotionality level like of it is just like really what ends up inspiring me, is just how they're able to explore these like deeply like emotional kind of themes. And I'm very much like interested in make that like translate that to like electronic music. But yeah, probably like all like the different like indie rock, I guess, like, yeah, even something like Slint, for as abstract as it is, like, I mean, they definitely informed a lot of stuff on the most recent album. And just like, I want to say them just because like I've been like getting back into them again lately, and it's just like it's been inspiring this like most recent stuff I've been like working on. And just like, yeah, I guess like a lot of like the 80s and 90s indie rock that I've really just like become so like prominent in my daily listening. And
that's cool. It's fun when you get to listen to stuff that doesn't sound anything like what you make. And then every once in a while you catch a little DNA from some band that you love, but you figure like maybe not everybody would necessarily catch on to that. Yeah,
for sure. And I guess like country music at first was a bit of an unexpected influence for me, but like as I started making more and more music, it just became like all I was listening to. And so it just became like rooted in the kind of like the musical DNA, like you're saying. And just like so that was definitely like unexpected at first, but just like once I started listening to it more and more, it's just like it just made sense in a way.
That's awesome. All right, what about question number 4?
Dream artist / producer to work with. Man.
And it is dream, so it can be as big as you want.
Yeah.
Let's do a live though.
Live,
Some people like to go dead, which
There's
is fine.
There's so many options though if you go dead.
Yeah, if you do that, it's like, dude.
Like, how can you choose?
Yeah, exactly.
Probably like Oneohtrix Point Never.
Yeah, be crazy.
Or like, or Aphex Twin, or just like even. Yeah.
Did you like his new song that came out, Aphex Twin?
Which one is that?
I don't even remember what it was called, but it came out.
Like, I think I saw that. Ago. I don't think I actually ended up listening to it. But
yeah, I don't know. I mean, I
didn't realize it was like a new song. I can't. I think I just like it got lost in my feed, and I didn't end up like actually checking it out. But
I mean, I don't know. I am not exactly a connoisseur of his music, but I do like a good handful of his songs. But there's a lot that I don't even know the names of. I just kind of shuffle.
I mean, a lot of them you can't even pronounce.
Exactly. So I'm like, I don't even try. I mean, Alberto Balsam or whatever, that song rules. But the new one, I was just like, I was a little underwhelmed, but also it's not typically like for me anyway. So I was just curious what you thought. You'll have to listen to it and let me know what you think.
I need to check that out. I mean, he's still like producing stuff I really like. Like I liked a lot of the stuff on the Cheetah EP. I guess that was a few years ago now. But I mean, like he's still doing really cool stuff, and it's all very still much like electro kind of sounding. Right. I think, but it's still like fresh, and it's still, he continues to do really great stuff. So I really want to check that out.
Aphex Twin would be legendary working with him.
Yeah, there's some like, just some electronic or even like classical adjacent kind of artist, just would be like really great, I think. Yeah,
that would be awesome. Yeah. All right, let's wrap it up. Last question here on that note.
Perfect album front to back I'm gonna have to go with Raw Power by Iggy and the Stooges because that's my favorite album of all time.
Really? Dude, I've never listened to the Stooges or Iggy Pop. Really? Like, I mean, I've tried a few times, and I like listened to a couple songs and then just stopped.
It's like the perfect rock album. It's the perfect album, but it's definitely the perfect rock album. It's just like.
Which one is this?
Raw Power.
Raw Power.
There's like not a single thing I'd change about it.
Oh yeah, I mean this album cover for sure. Yeah, I know.
You have to listen to the Iggy mix though, not the Bowie mix, because like the Iggy mix is like where it's just like totally in the red. It's like full on distortion, just like
Bowie did like his mix.
Yeah, the Bowie mix it just sucks out all the life of it, and it's kind of like it's been like a hot like topic of debate, kind of like. But a lot of people agree that like the Iggy mix is like superior. They each did their own mixes, but that album is incredible. A close second for me would be Piper at the Gates of Dawn.
Okay.
Because I think that's another perfect album.
Yeah. I gotta. What album cover is that?
It's like the kind of kaleidoscope psychedelic.
Oh yeah, is it their first one?
It's their first album. Yeah.
Dude, this is a weird one.
I think they're only one with Sid all the way through.
Oh, okay. It's strange. Dude, the whole time I remember listening to it, being like, I couldn't get my footing. Like anytime I felt like I understood what the song was doing or where we were in the song, it changed completely.
Yeah.
I'm like, what's going on?
It's really out there, but that's why I love it. And I mean,
super creative.
Yeah, and I like Murmur by R.E.M. is like that's like a near perfect album for me, and just like I mean, no matter how many times I listen to it, it's just still so fresh, and it's just like every song is iconic. And it's just like that's pretty close for me to those two. I mean, it's like all three of those albums I'm just always like forever just inspired by, and just like I mean they're all of them have just been these like they really are these like just like they captured lightning in a bottle. Just like something about those recording sessions are just so like so magical, and just like yeah.
I saw the other day that I saw today that a few days ago was the anniversary of Radio Free Europe coming out, which was like their single from the album. And it's funny because I want, especially once I knew I was moving to Athens. Yeah. I was like, I need to like REM. Like I can't not like REM and move to Athens. And I mean, of course I like some of the hits and all that, but I wasn't into like albums by them really. And I tried to get into, the bigger ones like Out of Time, I think is what it's called, and Document and Automatic for the People. And, I definitely liked some of the stuff on there, but the one that grabbed me was Murmur. Yeah. And I don't know why.
It's so different from their later stuff because it's very gothic. It's very folky. It's very
new wave compared to like
very, very post-punky. And it's still like them as a punk band. It's still like, I know Michael has always been like really inspired by like Arthur Rimbaud and like Walt Whitman and that stuff, and that's kind of like I've always with Murmur in particular I've always kind of sensed that influence even if it wasn't like intentional. Like that's kind of what I associate with that kind of era of their music. And I think the run from like Chronic Town to Fables is just like unmatched. I mean, by any like American rock band, honestly. But I love, even going past Fables, like I mean there's stuff on like Automatic and Adventures in Hi-Fi that I just love, and it's just like some of my favorite like material. But I think my absolute favorite era is definitely those first 3 albums and the first EP for sure.
Dude, Murmur goes crazy. I love that album. But cool, Marcel Sletten, we've done almost an hour and a half on the pod.
Oh, crazy.
It's been awesome, man. Thank you for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for
talking
having
about
me.
Yeah, of course, your tunes, Mammatus Clouds, which everybody needs to go listen to. Catch a Primordial Void show. Check out what you guys have put out. It's been a blast getting to chat with you, man. I appreciate you coming on the show.
Thanks so much.
Of course. All right, Marcel, I'll talk to you later. Thank you again for tuning into the newest episode of On That Note with Parker Whirling. Remember, not only can you listen to the episodes on Apple Podcast and Spotify, but you can also watch the episodes on my YouTube channel, which is linked in the description below. And on that note, I'll see you guys next time.